The brutal discrimination against Alexis began in an airport owned by her own company. A security officer humiliated her, unaware that he was standing before the airline's president. The humiliating screening in front of a crowd, the angry looks, and comments that people like her don't belong here only strengthened her resolve to dismantle this system from within. But when millions learned of what had happened, her next move shocked even those who thought they'd seen it all. But let's start from the beginning. Alexis, a successful black woman in her 40s and the president of a major airline, arrives at the international airport for business. She's dressed in casual attire, sweats and sneakers, without her usual symbols of authority, hoping to stay incognito and observe the company's service from the inside without attracting attention. Traveling alone, she heads to the check-in area, where she's greeted by an airline representative on duty. No sooner has she checked in than a security officer, a tall white man in his mid-30s with a wary expression, approaches her. He scrutinizes her ticket, then looks at Alexis herself, and instead of conducting the usual screening, he starts asking additional questions. A suspicious look appears in his eyes as he slowly asks about the luggage she's carrying and the purpose of her travel. Alexis answers calmly, but it's as if he deliberately slows down the process, asking another odd question about her route and reasons for the trip. She notices how he repeatedly rechecks her passport and ticket, showing no sign of being satisfied with her explanations. Alexis feels the tension rising, but she keeps a calm expression, knowing that any emotion could be misinterpreted against her. Then, the officer abruptly decides to search her carry-on. He asks Alexis to step aside and opens her bag, rummaging through her belongings with thinly veiled disdain. His movements are demonstratively careless, and he seems to barely hold back his irritation, casting brief, distrustful glances in her direction. Alexis tries not to let her feelings show, but every gesture, from his deliberately slow document inspection to his sarcastic looks, humiliates her. She notices that other passengers pass by with puzzled looks, seeing her delayed and subjected to an additional search with no visible cause. The security officer throws out another abrupt question, hinting at her unusual appearance for business class, and with a note of irony, remarks that people like her often cause extra trouble. Alexis feels indignation rising within her, but she chooses not to engage in a direct confrontation. She calmly completes all procedures, mentally noting every detail of what transpired. After finishing the check, Alexis heads to the waiting area, but notices that the security officer continues to watch her. His gaze shows suspicion, as if he doesn't believe her access to the lounge was justified. Alexis tries to ignore him and heads to the counter to wait for boarding. But just a few minutes later, he reappears beside her, and with obvious irritation, asks her to show her documents again. Maintaining her composure, Alexis hands him her passport and ticket, but his behavior grows even more hostile. The officer slowly examines her documents and, raising his voice slightly, announces that she is allegedly prohibited from carrying certain items that were found in her carry-on. He points to her makeup bag and lunchbox, saying that items like these often cause extra trouble, and adds that she'll have to go through another screening if she wants to avoid issues with her flight. Alexis attempts to explain that her belongings comply with all regulations, but he cuts her off, saying, "Our rules apply to everyone." Her legitimate comments are flatly dismissed, and with a stubborn expression, he leads her to the screening area, where he insists on inspecting every item in her bag. He demonstratively opens her makeup bag, examining its contents with contempt, and shakes his head disapprovingly. The scene attracts the attention of other passengers, who watch in surprise as Alexis is forced to submit silently to the degrading inspections. The officer continues to hold her up, scrutinizing every item as though intentionally creating an impression of suspicion, while making comments about how people like her don't always follow the rules. Alexis feels a sense of helplessness and growing indignation, but her restraint is the only thing keeping her from an outright confrontation. Realizing she is being humiliated for no reason, Alexis makes a decision. She will not let this incident go unanswered. Having finally cleared all screenings, Alexis heads to the waiting area and spots a company employee, Joshua, someone she's collaborated with on several projects. He immediately recognizes her, and seeing the tension on her face, he worriedly asks if everything is all right. Alexis briefly describes the situation, trying to keep it low-key, but Joshua is visibly outraged and decides that the incident needs to be addressed immediately. Joshua approaches the security officer and, with a calm but firm tone, questions him about the selective approach he used in screening Alexis. The officer's demeanor changes instantly, realizing that he may have gone too far. He backpedals, attempting to assure Joshua that he was just following standard procedures. But when Joshua reveals that Alexis is the president of the airline that owns this airport, a look of shock and panic flashes across the officer's face. At this moment, a journalist who happens to be in the waiting area overhears their conversation. Seeing the commotion, he comes closer to understand what's happening. Hearing that Alexis is the president of the company, he decides to capture the incident on record and begins filming. The security officer, noticing that he's being recorded, suddenly grasps the gravity of the situation and tries to justify himself. He claims that his actions were driven solely by security measures and that he had no idea who Alexis was. Alexis keeps a calm, composed expression and explains that his biased treatment violates the company's principles, which are intended to ensure equal and respectful treatment for every customer. She adds that the situation he's put himself in will serve as an example of how no individual responsible for security and service should behave. As information about the incident spreads to other employees and the video of the officer's apology appears online, it becomes clear that Alexis has no intention of letting this go without consequences. The video of the incident, showing Alexis calmly but firmly explaining to the security officer the unacceptability of his behavior, quickly goes viral on social media. The footage captures the officer's disoriented reaction as he realizes who he's dealing with and tries to justify himself. But it's already too late. Posts with outraged comments multiply, and media attention is drawn to the fact that an airline president faced discrimination in her own airport. In response to the public outcry, the airline releases an official statement reaffirming its commitment to equality and respect for every passenger. Alexis gives a speech highlighting that such incidents are unacceptable and urges airport management and other companies to review and enhance their staff training on equality and bias awareness. Her message receives widespread support and approval from the public and her colleagues, many of whom make similar statements. Alexis decides to launch an internal investigation and implement new mandatory training for all company employees. She personally oversees the process, understanding that her actions could drive change beyond her own company. A few days later, airport management announces a temporary suspension of the security officer involved and a comprehensive review of their security practices to check for bias. The incident becomes a significant precedent, sparking public discussions about the need for change. Alexis uses this situation to establish new standards, showing everyone that bias and discrimination will be addressed at every level. This case transforms from a personal affront into a powerful movement for justice, with Alexis emerging as a symbol of strength and resilience in the fight for equality.